Rambam, Maimonides' teachings, ninth book, the laws of purity, and we're learning the laws of uh, tumas mace, the laws of a corpse that you come in contact with, that you become impure, that you need purification as a result. So in the 21st chapter, we're dealing with that if you have an earthenware vessel, the Torah tells us, meaning, right, not a paper cup like this, but let's say earthenware, like actually a mug. I have a coffee mug that's earthenware, right? And if it's covered with a proper covering that is um, sealed, a sealed covering. So whatever inside here, if it's in the same room, we know that if you're in the same structure as a corpse, so everything in the room becomes impure, right? The things, the functional things, whatever, we're not going to go in that detail now, in the room become impure, meaning they can't be used in a state of purity, right? So, which means when you're going to the Holy Temple, doesn't mean daily. You can be in a state of impurity on a daily basis, all right? If you are not doing something unique that needs purity, like bringing an offering in the Holy Temple or celebrating the holiday in Jerusalem, right? So now we have a law. The Torah tells us that specifically earthenware container, not a metal container, right? But earthenware container that is sealed properly. So if there's a corpse in the room, what's inside of there will not become impure. Okay? So what is the source says, asks the Rambam, that teaches us that sealed covering saves the contents of the container from contracting ritual impurity. In a shelter, meaning in a structure, right, that there's a corpse there in that structure, right? Where do we get that from, right? So it says in Numbers, any open container that does not have a sealed covering on top of it is impure. So one can derive from that that if there is a sealed covering on it, it is pure, right? Because the fact that the Torah says that it didn't have a covering, that's when it's impure, is implying that when it does have a covering, it is pure, right? That makes sense? So remember, Rambam is bringing a proof from a verse in the Torah, but that verse in the Torah is written shorthand, as the biblical law is shorthand, and I'm not the biblical law, the written law is shorthand, and the oral tradition is the elongation, the longhand, to explain what that means. So that implication, that's part of the oral law. And here he goes further. According to oral tradition, it was taught that the verse is speaking only about earthenware container. For it was a container that contracts impurity only through its opening. Therefore, its opening is closed, a sealed covering, all of its contents are protected. So the verse didn't say earthenware, but we know elsewhere that an earthenware is different, how it contracts impurity. Usually impurity would be contracted how? By touching the corpse, right? If this, here's a corpse. You touch it, you're impure. You carry it on a bier, right? In a coffin, you're not touching it, but you're carrying it, also impure, right? Even though you didn't touch it. That's the second way. Third way, in a structure. That is in a structure. Under that, if you're in the same structure, right? The corpse is in this room. I'm here. I become impure, right? Which means I just have to go through a process of purification in order to not be impure anymore. Only if not only, but specifically, if I want to go to Jerusalem for the holiday and bring offerings there and so on and so forth, I need to be in a state of purity, right? Now, the Torah tells us uniquely about an earthenware vessel. That's another way that it contracts impurity. If the impurity went to its airspace. Now, if it touched, that's not a unique law of an earthenware vessel. Why? Because that law we know outside of an earthenware vessel, right? Anything that touches, I touch, anything that touches, it has to be an earthenware vessel. It could be a metal spoon. Metal spoon touches it, becomes impure, right? But here the Torah teaches us that if, like, again, if a piece, but when we say a corpse, we learn it doesn't have to be a full body. It could be just 3 ounces of the blood of a body. It could be an organ of the body, or even less. We learned that already, that it could be a minimal amount that would be from the body that would be considered becoming impure if you come in contact with it, right? Now, what if it went in and it didn't touch the sides of the vessel? Okay, this is small. So, and then we're talking about the rule and law rather than the practicality. Well, here, if there was a piece of a corpse and it most likely, in the end is going to drop. Well, what if it's very wide? But it doesn't matter. It's the parameter of the law that we're learning here, and that's what's important, right? So there's unique over here. Thank you. That if it goes into the airspace, that's only by earthenware vessel, the Torah tells us. That's why we say that the space of it is unique of an earthenware vessel as opposed to touch, carrying, or in the same structure, right? Being in the airspace is only by air. So that's why the implication is if it was covered, you're saving that airspace. When is that? Only by earthenware vessel, right? Got it? So, so such containers include containers made from cow turds.
Can the earthenware vessel be purified by libun?
No, earthenware vessel cannot be purified through libun. Good question, Jeff. Libun means through fire, right? It can't be purified through fire. The only way that it could be purified is by its breaking. When it's broken, it's no longer a functional vessel, then it could be put back together to become a functional vessel. Okay, that's unique by earthenware, by the way. Doesn't exist elsewhere, right? Others, like if it was a metal, Jeff, it was a metal spoon that became, but actually, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's by purity. Now, what you're really thinking about is if it became unkosher. Two separate things: kosher laws and spiritual impurity. They're not the same idea. Not the same idea. They're in the Torah. We learn they're next to each other, but they're not the same idea. So, for example, if I had a spoon and it became not kosher because it went into a pot of milk and meat, or went into a pot of that was cooking milk and meat, or a pot of non-kosher meat, and I stirred with it, it becomes unkosher. The way I would purify that spoon is putting it into boiling hot water. If it was a barbecue and it was direct heat, that non-kosher meat that you put on a barbecue, and then you took the spatula, right, to turn over the hamburger, it becomes also not kosher. That has to be through libon, through direct flame, to kosher it. Because it became unkosher through direct flame, so you kosher it through direct flame. But that's the laws of kosher, right? Not the laws of spiritual impurity, right? Here, we're talking about spiritual impurity, and specifically because you can also become impure by touching a carcass of an animal, right? There, it's only for that day, that day, only for one day. Touching a human corpse is for 7 days, right? So it's different laws and different purification process. And so they're different. Very good, Jeff, your question, but it's not what we're speaking about over here. Nonetheless, that being said about we're going to get into the earthenware, not here, about how you can fix it. Okay, we're good. Very complicated details over here, right? But excellent question. Okay.
Asking myself about the process of purification after,
right. Well, yeah, there's purification. Yeah, many different. Exactly. So, like a conversion process, part of the conversion process, person goes to the mikvah because that's a purification process. Going to the mikvah. Exactly. Okay.
If someone's touched a corpse, you said it's 7 days.
Yes. Yeah, but we're not going that here. We're not dealing with that part. I've just wanted to give a general, broad, understanding. So because it can get very confusing. Like in Jeff's question was a very good question. Okay. Let me show that. Okay. So from this, we can infer that the contents of any of the containers that are not susceptible to ritual impurity are protected when the container is closed with a sealed covering. So making a different statement over here, this is very detailed and can be confusing. So we spoke about earthenware, right? That if you cover it, right? But it's not just earthenware. There's also certain containers that are not susceptible to ritual impurity, right? They also will protect when the container is closed with a sealed covering, not just earthenware. Earthenware is considered a functional utensil, a normal functional utensil. By the way, what's the proof? Rambam, this is almost 1,000 years old. What he wrote over here, we still use earthenware vessels, right? I should bring over my coffee. I have a coffee mug. It's earthenware, right? So we still, right? However, there's other kinds of utensils that are not considered, don't contract ritual impurity because they're not considered real proper utensils, even though it's a utensil. And what's that? They include containers that are made from cow turds. You know what cow turds are? You know what the cow makes? So back in the day, they would make from what they leave over. They would make from it vessels. People were very poor, right? And they didn't have, they used the cow turds for fertilizer. But if you had a lot of cows, and you didn't grow that much produce, what are you gonna do with all the cow turds? Got to use it for something. So guess what they did? They fired it up, just like you take earthenware and you fire it up in a kiln. So you would fire that up also and use it as a vessel, but it can't contract impurity because it's in the end it stinks. Right? It's right. Furthermore, containers made from earth that was not put in a kiln, because earthenware is also made from the earth, right? Difference is, it was put in a kiln. If you didn't fire it up in the kiln and you just made something from the earth, it's also not of real value. It's, it's not a true value of some, not a true container. Okay. Furthermore, that the containers that are made from bones or the skin of fish or the bones of fowl. Why? We explained that earlier because at least fish, they come from under the sea. They are one with their environment. They don't become impure. When do you become impure? When you're separated from your source. Well, earth, we are on the earth. We're not in the earth. So therefore we can become impure. Things of the earth can, but the fish that are in their environment, they don't. They're more sort of connected to their source. Oversized wooden containers, because they don't become impure, because they're not, oh, shoot. Oh my gosh. Folks, I'm very sorry. I have a meeting that I am